The conference room buzzed with anticipation as Rachel watched her coworker Melissa fumble through the presentation slides. Her stomach churned with a mixture of anger and satisfaction as she observed Melissa's growing panic. The quarterly project review had become the stage for what could only be described as corporate theater, except Rachel held all the strings. Just 24 hours earlier, Rachel had stood in this very room, meticulously organizing her research materials and preparing to present the culmination of 6 months' work. At 52, she'd earned her senior position through years of dedication and countless late nights spent perfecting her craft. The marketing strategy she developed promised to revolutionize their department's approach, blending cutting-edge analytics with time-tested brand-building techniques. Melissa, barely 30 and relatively new to the company, had wormed her way into Rachel's good graces over the past few months. With her bright smile and eager attitude, she'd seemed like the perfect protégé, until last Wednesday. That's when Rachel had overheard Melissa claiming credit for the project during an impromptu meeting with upper management. "I've been developing this innovative strategy," Melissa had declared, completely omitting Rachel's role in its creation. The betrayal cut deep, especially coming from someone Rachel had mentored and trusted. But instead of confronting Melissa directly, Rachel had chosen a different path, one that would expose the truth in a way neither Melissa nor their superiors would soon forget. She had carefully removed the crucial data files from the presentation folder, leaving behind only the framework of her ideas. As Melissa clicked through empty graphs and incomplete charts, Rachel maintained her composed expression, though her heart raced with a mix of emotions she couldn't quite name. The young woman's voice began to waver, her confident facade crumbling with each passing second. Around the table, executives exchanged puzzled glances while junior team members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Rachel remembered how she'd first conceived the project during a particularly challenging period in her career. It had started as a simple idea jotted down on a napkin during a late-night coffee break, evolving into a comprehensive strategy that addressed both immediate marketing needs and long-term brand development. The sleepless nights spent refining the analytics models, the weekends sacrificed to polish presentations, all of it now hung in the balance as Melissa struggled to explain the glaring gaps in her supposed masterpiece. The irony wasn't lost on Rachel. Here was Melissa, standing before the very people who could make or break careers, trying to sell an idea she hadn't actually created. Meanwhile, Rachel sat quietly in the corner, her presence almost forgotten, knowing full well that every successful element of the presentation bore her intellectual fingerprint. The weight of experience rested heavily on her shoulders, not just in years but in the countless lessons learned from similar situations throughout her career. As the presentation faltered, Rachel noticed something unexpected, a flicker of recognition in Melissa's eyes. For a brief moment, their gazes met across the room, and Rachel saw something she hadn't anticipated, fear mixed with understanding. Perhaps Melissa realized too late that she'd underestimated her mentor, misjudging the depth of Rachel's knowledge and the strength of her resolve. The tension in the room continued to build, thick enough to touch. Senior managers leaned forward, pens poised above notebooks, waiting for answers that wouldn't come. Rachel's colleagues, many of whom had worked alongside her for years, began to exchange subtle glances that spoke volumes about their growing suspicions. They knew something was amiss, even if they couldn't yet articulate what exactly was wrong. Rachel's mind drifted back to the countless times she'd faced similar challenges throughout her career. There was the product launch in Chicago, where she'd caught a junior executive trying to pass off her market analysis as his own. Or the time in London when a promising young associate had attempted to claim credit for her breakthrough campaign strategy. Each incident had taught her valuable lessons about human nature, corporate politics, and the delicate balance between mentorship and self-preservation. What made this situation different was the calculated nature of her response. In the past, she might have confronted Melissa directly or reported the incident to human resources. But this time, something deeper drove her actions. Perhaps it was the accumulation of years spent watching others rise on borrowed merit, or maybe it was the realization that traditional methods of addressing such issues rarely led to meaningful change. Whatever the reason, Rachel had decided to let the situation play out naturally, allowing Melissa's own actions to reveal the truth. As Melissa stumbled through another incomplete section of the presentation, Rachel felt a complex mixture of emotions swirling within her. Anger at the betrayal competed with a strange sense of pride in her own strategic thinking. The satisfaction of seeing justice served mingled with disappointment that a talented young woman had chosen such a dishonest path. Most surprisingly, she felt a pang of sympathy for Melissa, remembering her own early days in the industry when ambition sometimes clouded judgment. Her thoughts returned to the missing files, carefully secured in her personal drive. Each one represented months of painstaking work, detailed consumer behavior patterns, predictive analytics models, comprehensive market research. Without them, the presentation was little more than an empty shell, a house of cards waiting to collapse under scrutiny. Yet Rachel understood that true innovation couldn't be replicated by simply copying surface-level elements. It required the deep understanding and insight that only came from genuine effort and experience. Around the table, the atmosphere grew increasingly uncomfortable. The marketing director cleared his throat repeatedly, while the CFO tapped his pen against his notebook in a rhythmic pattern that seemed to echo the tension in the room. Junior team members, who had initially looked up to Melissa with admiration, now appeared confused and uncertain. Rachel recognized the subtle shift in body language, the slight recoiling from Melissa's side of the table, the questioning glances directed toward her corner of the room. The irony of the situation struck Rachel with renewed force. Here she was, the actual creator of the strategy, sitting quietly while everyone waited for explanations that would never come. The presentation had become a performance art piece, with Melissa playing the unwitting lead role in a drama she hadn't fully understood when she accepted the part. Every pause, every stumble, every attempt to gloss over missing information served to highlight the fundamental flaw in Melissa's approach, the inability to truly understand what she was presenting. Rachel's fingers drummed lightly against her notebook, maintaining a steady rhythm that helped mask her internal turmoil. She remembered the countless hours spent mentoring Melissa, sharing insights about navigating corporate politics, building effective teams, and developing innovative strategies. Those sessions had seemed so promising at the time, filled with genuine enthusiasm and mutual respect. Now those memories felt tainted, like beautiful paintings marred by graffiti. The presentation reached its midway point, and Melissa's voice grew increasingly strained. Rachel watched as her former protégé attempted to explain away the missing data with vague references to technical difficulties and pending final analyses. The excuses sounded hollow, even to those unfamiliar with the project's details. Rachel knew that beyond the immediate discomfort of the situation lay larger questions about integrity, mentorship, and the true meaning of professional growth. As Melissa struggled to maintain composure, Rachel found herself reflecting on the broader implications of the moment. This wasn't just about one project or one instance of misplaced credit, it was about the culture of achievement and recognition within the company. She thought about all the young professionals watching this unfold, learning their own lessons about success and integrity. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders, not just for her own reputation but for the example she set for future generations of marketers. The room's temperature seemed to rise with each passing minute, though Rachel suspected the heat was primarily psychological. Sweat beaded on Melissa's forehead as she desperately tried to salvage the situation, her carefully rehearsed confidence unraveling like threads from a tapestry. Rachel's own breathing remained steady, though her pulse quickened with each failed attempt to explain the inexplicable gaps in the presentation. Observing the unfolding drama, Rachel noticed subtle shifts in the room's dynamics. The marketing team's youngest intern, whose wide-eyed admiration for Melissa had been evident in previous meetings, now stared at her screen with furrowed brows, occasionally glancing toward Rachel's corner of the room. The IT manager, who had once praised Melissa's innovative approach during a casual lunch conversation, now typed furiously on his laptop, likely cross-referencing the presented material with archived documents. Rachel's mind raced through possible outcomes, each scenario branching into multiple possibilities. Would Melissa crack under pressure and admit the truth? Would she attempt to deflect blame onto technical issues or other team members? Or would she somehow manage to bluff her way through the presentation despite the missing data? The uncertainty created an electric tension that charged the air, making even the soft rustle of papers sound unnaturally loud. Years of experience had taught Rachel to read these situations like a seasoned conductor interpreting an orchestra's performance. She recognized the precise moment when Melissa's confidence began to fracture, not in her words, which remained polished if slightly rushed, but in the micro-expressions that betrayed her growing anxiety. The slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the rapid blinking that accompanied technical explanations, the way her fingers gripped the presentation remote like a lifeline, all spoke to the mounting pressure. The impact rippled through the room like waves from a stone tossed into still water. Senior executives, who had initially leaned forward with interest, now reclined in their chairs, their expressions ranging from mild confusion to outright skepticism. The chief marketing officer's pen, which had been moving steadily across his notebook, now hovered mid-air, its motion arrested by emerging doubt. Even the usually unflappable HR director showed signs of discomfort, her perfectly manicured nails tapping in a regular rhythm on the conference table. Rachel's own emotional landscape proved equally complex. Beneath the surface calm she projected lay a maelstrom of conflicting feelings. Satisfaction at seeing justice take its course warred with disappointment in Melissa's choices. Pride in her own strategic thinking mingled with concern for the young woman's future. The protective instinct she'd felt as a mentor battled against the hard-earned wisdom that sometimes people must face the consequences of their actions to truly grow. As Melissa launched into yet another attempt to explain away missing data points, Rachel's attention shifted to the clock on the wall. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each second elongating while minutes slipped away unnoticed. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the conference room windows cast long shadows that crept across the table like silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual midday energy, oblivious to the career-defining moment playing out within these glass walls. The presentation software hummed softly in the background, its digital transitions mocking Melissa's increasing desperation. Rachel's fingers brushed against the edge of her laptop, where the missing files lay safely stored. She knew that with a single keystroke, she could end the charade, restore order, and reclaim her rightful place at the center of attention. Yet something deeper, more complex than simple vindication, held her back. This moment wasn't just about exposing a lie, it was about revealing truths that extended far beyond one project or one person's ambition. Rachel's gaze swept across the room, taking in the varied reactions of her colleagues. Some wore expressions of polite confusion, while others openly displayed their skepticism. The marketing director's pen had stopped moving entirely, its tip hovering above his notebook as he processed the unfolding disaster. Even the usually stoic finance team members exchanged concerned glances, their spreadsheets momentarily forgotten. The air conditioning system kicked in with a soft whir, providing a counterpoint to Melissa's increasingly strained explanations. Time seemed to slow as Rachel processed the scene unfolding before her. Each awkward pause, each forced smile from Melissa, carried the weight of years of corporate experience and human understanding. She recalled similar moments from her past, the sinking feeling of realizing someone had crossed a line, the bitter taste of betrayal mixed with professional disappointment. Yet this situation felt different, more complex than any she'd encountered before. Her mind wandered back to the early days of her career, when she'd faced her own share of ethical dilemmas and professional challenges. There was the time she'd stayed up for 72 hours straight to complete a project after her original team abandoned her, or the occasion when she turned down a lucrative opportunity rather than compromise her principles. These experiences had shaped her understanding of what truly mattered in professional life: integrity, authenticity, and the courage to stand by one's work. The current situation represented more than just a personal affront. It embodied the ongoing struggle between experience and ambition, between earned wisdom and youthful eagerness. Rachel recognized aspects of her younger self in Melissa, the same drive to succeed, the same desire for recognition, but also saw the critical differences in their approaches to achievement. Where she had built her career on solid foundations of hard work and genuine contribution, Melissa had attempted to shortcut the process, misunderstanding that success without substance was ultimately hollow. As Melissa stumbled through another section of the presentation, Rachel's thoughts turned to the broader implications of the moment. Beyond the immediate discomfort in the conference room lay larger questions about workplace culture, mentorship, and the transmission of professional values. She considered the message this situation would send to the younger employees watching silently from their seats, their faces masks of confusion and growing comprehension. The lesson here extended beyond simple right and wrong. It touched upon the fundamental nature of professional growth and the importance of earning one's achievements. The sunlight streaming through the windows had shifted noticeably, casting longer shadows across the conference table. Rachel noted how the changing light illuminated the room's occupants differently, revealing nuances in their expressions that hadn't been apparent earlier. The marketing interns, who had arrived with notebooks ready to capture pearls of wisdom, now scribbled furiously, though whether recording notes or documenting the unfolding disaster remained unclear. The sales team representatives, typically animated participants in such meetings, sat unusually still, their usual bravado replaced by cautious observation. Rachel's own position in the room took on symbolic significance. Seated slightly apart from the main group, she occupied a space that felt simultaneously central and peripheral to the drama unfolding. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Melissa's growing distress, creating an almost theatrical dynamic that underscored the situation's inherent tension. The missing files, safely stored in her personal drive, represented more than just absent data. They symbolized the gap between appearance and reality, between claimed expertise and actual knowledge. Years of professional experience had taught Rachel that moments like these often revealed more about individuals and organizations than any formal evaluation or performance review ever could. The way people reacted to crisis, handled pressure, and processed unexpected challenges spoke volumes about their character and values. As she observed her colleagues' varied responses, from the marketing director's careful note-taking to the finance team's subtle shifting in their seats, she gained new insights into the complex web of relationships and expectations that define their professional environment. The presentation software's gentle chime marked the transition to another slide, though Melissa's explanation faltered before she could elaborate on its contents. Rachel watched as her former protégé's carefully constructed facade began to crack, revealing glimpses of the uncertainty and fear beneath. The situation had transformed from a simple case of misattributed credit into something more profound, a crucible in which values were tested, assumptions challenged, and true character revealed. Rachel's awareness expanded beyond the immediate drama to encompass the larger context of her professional journey. This moment represented not just a test of Melissa's integrity, but also a reflection point for herself and the organization. The decisions made here, the lessons learned, and the examples set would resonate far beyond the single presentation, influencing how people approached collaboration, recognition, and professional growth in the future. As the presentation neared its conclusion, Rachel found herself contemplating the various paths this situation might take and the potential consequences each held. Melissa's attempts to navigate the presentation's remaining sections grew increasingly desperate, her voice adopting a higher pitch that betrayed her rising anxiety. The marketing director's pen, which had moved steadily throughout most meetings, now rested motionless on his notepad, its ink drying as he processed the unfolding events. Rachel's own breathing remained measured, though her pulse quickened with the anticipation of what might come next. The possibilities branched out like a complex decision tree in her mind. If Melissa somehow managed to conclude the presentation without catastrophic failure, would that validate her approach? Could she possibly recover from this exposure of her deception? Conversely, if the situation deteriorated further, how would that affect not just Melissa's career but the entire team's morale and trust dynamics? Rachel weighed these scenarios against her own options: to intervene and reveal the truth immediately, to allow the situation to reach its natural conclusion, or to wait for a more strategic moment to address the core issue. Each choice carried its own set of implications. Revealing the missing files now would certainly expose Melissa's dishonesty, but it might also be perceived as vindictive or overly dramatic. Waiting until the official review period would demonstrate patience and professionalism, yet risked allowing false impressions to solidify. The most intriguing option, an informal conversation with Melissa afterward, offered the possibility of mentorship and redemption, though it demanded considerable emotional investment and faith in the young woman's capacity for growth. Rachel's thoughts circled back to the broader organizational impact. How would this incident influence the company's culture of innovation and idea sharing? Would it encourage more rigorous attribution practices, or might it breed paranoia and defensive behavior among team members? The marketing interns, who had witnessed the entire spectacle, would carry these lessons forward into their own careers, potentially shaping how future generations approached collaboration and credit. The clock's hands continued their steady progression, marking time in a room where seconds felt like minutes and minutes stretched into hours. Outside, the city's rhythm remained unchanged. Cars honked, pedestrians hurried along sidewalks, and delivery trucks unloaded their cargo, but within these walls, careers hung in delicate balance. The air conditioning system cycled on again, its mechanical hum providing a counterpoint to Melissa's increasingly strained explanations and the growing tension in the room. Rachel's fingers rested lightly on her laptop, where the crucial files waited, their absence creating ripples throughout the organization. She considered how this moment might redefine professional relationships, not just between mentor and protégé, but across the entire spectrum of workplace interactions. The decision she faced transcended personal satisfaction or professional vindication. It touched upon fundamental questions about how knowledge was valued, how contributions were recognized, and how growth was fostered within the corporate ecosystem. As Melissa launched into what was presumably the final section of her presentation, Rachel's attention sharpened. The young woman's voice, though still carrying traces of its usual confidence, betrayed subtle cracks in her composure. Rachel observed how Melissa's gestures had become more pronounced, her movements slightly exaggerated, classic signs of someone trying to compensate for weakening control of the situation. The marketing director's expression had evolved from mere skepticism to something approaching disappointment, while the finance team members exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their revised assessment of the project's validity. The room's atmosphere had transformed into something tangible, a physical manifestation of collective unease. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, casting sharp shadows that emphasized every nervous twitch and uncomfortable shift in posture. Rachel noticed how the junior team members had gradually turned their attention from Melissa to her corner of the room, their eyes seeking some explanation for the growing discrepancies in the presentation. The silence between Melissa's statements had grown heavier, each pause stretching longer than the last, filled with unspoken questions and mounting tension. Rachel's mind worked methodically through the unfolding drama, analyzing each reaction and response like a chess master anticipating multiple moves ahead. She recognized the precise moment when Melissa's carefully constructed narrative began to collapse, not with a dramatic flourish, but through the cumulative effect of small inconsistencies and unanswered queries. The young woman's attempts to bridge these gaps with technical jargon and vague promises of forthcoming data only highlighted the fundamental weakness of her position. The emotional landscape of the room had shifted dramatically since the presentation's beginning. What had started as polite professional interest had transformed into something more complex, a mixture of disappointment, betrayal, and reluctant acknowledgement of uncomfortable truths. Rachel watched as colleagues who had previously supported Melissa's rise now subtly distanced themselves, their body language speaking louder than any verbal condemnation could. The marketing interns, who had entered the room with starry-eyed admiration for their seemingly brilliant colleague, now scribbled notes with furrowed brows, their perceptions irrevocably altered. As the presentation approached its final moments, Rachel became acutely aware of the multiple layers of meaning embedded in this single event. Beyond the immediate question of credit and recognition lay larger issues about professional ethics, the nature of mentorship, and the delicate balance between ambition and integrity. The situation had evolved from a simple case of misattributed work into a complex examination of values and priorities, forcing everyone present to confront their own beliefs about success and achievement. The sunlight streaming through the windows had shifted noticeably, casting longer shadows that seemed to mirror the changing dynamics in the room. The ticking of the wall clock, previously a background noise, now punctuated the growing tension with almost theatrical precision. Rachel's own position, as witness, participant, and arbiter of the situation, had taken on a significance she hadn't anticipated when she first decided to let events unfold naturally. The decision she now faced carried implications far beyond this single moment, touching upon fundamental questions about leadership, accountability, and the evolution of professional culture within the organization. As Melissa's presentation crumbled to its inevitable conclusion, Rachel stood up calmly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "There seems to be some missing context," she said, her voice steady and clear. She connected her laptop to the projector, and the room filled with the complete data, her data. Gasps rippled through the audience as Rachel walked them through the project's depth, her expertise undeniable. Melissa sank into her seat, cheeks flushed, while Rachel didn't accuse or gloat. Instead, she turned to her former protégé and said simply, "Mistakes are part of growth. But owning them is what builds trust." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. By the end of the meeting, respect for Rachel had deepened, and Melissa approached her quietly afterward. "I'm sorry," she whispered, genuinely contrite. Rachel nodded, seeing an opportunity not just for accountability but redemption, for both of them. From that day forward, their dynamic shifted. Melissa became a better, humbler professional, and Rachel continued mentoring, with firmer boundaries but no less heart. Justice was served, lessons were learned, and integrity prevailed.